I'm pleased to introduce Christian Moeller today, who is not a new faculty anymore. This is your third year here now. And he's been a fantastic, strong addition to our department. He's very much a leader, and he's helped shape it. It's a new department, only 6 years old. So he's played a major role. His background is very much in architecture. He actually studied in Frankfurt at the Polytechnical University, and he's moved into interactive environmental installations that he'll talk about. Christian has very much a mind of an architect still, in my opinion, and I saw this very much in action when we would sit in meetings together for the redesign of the Broad building, which we're moving into next year. He actually took lead in discussion with the architects, and it became very clear to me how his work is still very much informed by this education and background. It'll be interesting to see how he came up with some of the ideas and how he moved into the interactive media arts work and where he's still connecting to architecture. I will not read the long list of exhibitions because I imagine you're going to talk about it, but I will mention that recently Lars Moeller, who is a famous European publisher of artist books in particular, very, very prestigious, did a monograph on Christian Moeller's work that goes from 1991 until 2003, I think even. And the part of this book, which I'm sure you'll mention, is on the web. So his work is actually quite well documented, and it's got a very clear and clean trajectory that I think you'll see in his work throughout. So please give a warm welcome to Christian Moeller.
Thank you, Victoria. Can you hear me? Yes? Great. That's the book she's talking about. You're all welcome to buy it. It's really expensive. And you find it only in architecture, design, art-related bookshops. Yeah, do me the favor. I make my living with these kind of things. Victoria asked me to spend a moment on my past. I never did that before. I saw Vasa doing it, and actually found it kind of exciting. And this morning I was sitting down and I thought about how I developed myself into some, let's say, artistic interest. And I did it probably in a strange way. I left school extremely early. I left school when I was 15, left home as well, and started to work for engineering company and learned the profession of draftsman. Did that for a couple of years, then I became tired of it, and I've realized that it was not such a great idea to leave school so early, and went back to school, made my high school degree, and got then an amazing opportunity when I was 18, 19. A French company hired me as a technical assistant for a project in Western Africa, in a country called Gabon. That's here, just underneath of the equator, for a railway project from Boué. This is this little community there in the middle of the jungle, to Lastorville, 150 miles of railway along the famous river Ogooué. It's the second biggest river in Africa. Became known because Albert Schweitzer, the medical doctor from Switzerland, founded his famous hospital in Lambarene, what is here, on the same river, in the early 50s, where he got the Nobel Prize for. So that was a very intensive time for a young boy like me, being in such a, let's say, beautiful and super scary nature, scary because I mean it is so much nature around you. If you lose orientation, you never make it out of this damn forest. And I saw then living in Libreville the first political riots with dead people in the street. I saw a lot of racism, crime. Fell in love for the first time, big time, with a woman. So it was a very, very intense time for me. And they taught me to become a topographer, surveying the country. And then, traveling back Africa to all the Western African countries, made it back to my hometown Frankfurt, and started to study architecture. I had, let's say, I've made the funds for doing so in Africa. Not that they paid me very much, but there was no way to spend any money in the bush. And so I could start doing architecture, but I did it I was probably not so excited about the theme. I just took it for some reasons, but I was not terribly interested in architecture, so I was totally in student politics. I was the nightmare of the faculty of this university, that for sure. And because they didn't like me and I didn't like them, I got tired again, and I left to the Caribbean. And that was the Dominican Republic. I lived in Santo Domingo for 2 years, and I made a very exciting, huge audio vision together with a Cuban photographer about the voodoo along the Haitian border in this very, very poor area of the country. What was an amazing time. Coming back, good question. 83, something like that. Or 84, I don't know. Then coming back to Frankfurt, I finished my degree, and then suddenly something interesting happened. In these very last 6 months at this university, I was running into the first interesting professor at that damn school, and he was able to get me excited for architecture within this very short period of time. Unfortunately, I had to make my diploma, and I finished before I could really elaborate on it, and so that brought me to Vienna, and I joined the Academy of Fine Arts at the Schillerplatz in Vienna, a really old school, big-time art school, to continue my architecture elaboration or exploration with this man. His name is Gustav Peichel. He was at that time one of the top architects in Europe. I mean, he's still, but he's now very old. He is famous for his fantastic buildings, but at the same time, and that I found so fascinating, he has a reputation as a caricaturist. He runs his own TV show in Austria. Once per year, every New Year's Eve, he runs this TV show, and more than 50% of the population is watching it. So this guy is really, really popular with his cartoons, and an architect at the same time. Found that amazing. Then I went back to, again, Frankfurt, my hometown, started my own architectural practice, but I've realized I started a little too early, because the first client I had, who was a really nice, civilized man, I almost ran him into bankruptcy, because I tripled the estimated budget for this house. I built it for him. It took a few years before we became friends again. But I've learned that was too early. And so I joined Günther Behnisch and Partner, what was the most important architecture firm in Germany. At that time, they became famous with the building of the Olympic Stadium in Munich in the 70s. This most beautiful, huge sports environment in this park, what is, to my knowledge, the economically most successful sports environment in the world, because it's so beautiful, embedded into the nature, and people like to be there. This here building from the early 90s, it's the House of Parliament in Bonn, in the late 80s, just before the wall came down. So this is, let's say, the type of very modern, little technology-oriented architecture this architect is famous for, but then at the same time he makes these crazy provocative things. This is still the House of Parliament, and this is the handrail of the staircase for the president to come down into the hall. I mean, you can imagine how people and these politicians were freaking out about this, but this architect uses all his power to just annoy them, and in the most beautiful way. So it's a very strong character. You can learn plenty of things. That was in Stuttgart. I came back to Frankfurt, and while working for this famous architect, I've realized, I mean, there were probably something like 60 to 80 young colleagues, same age like me, working in the studio, and I've realized, hell, I'm not doing so bad, but there were at least 3, 4, 5 fellows who were for sure the stronger and more talented architect than I was. And that in such a small community of 50 people, right? So I decided, then probably not so good idea to keep going with this. I have to find something else. And I went to Frankfurt, and we're running into this man who's here on the leash of his wife, Wally Export. His name is Peter Weibel, a very famous philosopher, artist, critique, theorist, museum gallery director from Austria. He's right now the director of the ZKM in Karlsruhe in Germany. And he became my mentor. We liked each other. And he has the role of almost like my uncle. And he brought me in contact with electronic media at the late 80s. And this is what I do until now, basically. Now I get tired of this. So we will see how that ends up. My first project I did was that one. The very, very first one. I did it together with the theater in Germany. It's an installation between 2 subway stations. There was the graphics designer I used to work with at that time. So while looking out of the window, you were passing a number of frozen images created by the backdrop painters of the theater, and then looking through some blinds which were attached to a row of columns before it made these single images animated. 380 images which you pass with something like 40 miles per hour. So somebody who looked at that carefully has realized that is faked here, and I had to fake it. It was interesting. I got the money for this installation together within a week. The mayor, everybody loved it, got strong promoters. The city wanted to help with labor and everything, and then at the last minute, as we were going along, all the engineering was already done. The head of the authorities from the subway people came with concerns, and the concern was that if you make something interesting between the stations in the tunnel, young kids feel animated to go in there and make graffiti there, and that would create a risk for safety for these young kids, which nobody should be responsible for, and or wanted to be responsible for, and so they killed the whole project. So my very first project I was so proud of was totally unsuccessful. Then I did a huge amount of things, especially in this beginning of my career, like a maniac. And there's no way that I can show you all of these things. So I show you some works which, let's say, where I've learned something or where I changed little direction. This one here is a view into the Mozart Museum in Vienna, the Figaro House, where Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart used to live many years and where he has created the biggest part of his body of work. The most significant part within that was the opera The Figaro. And I was invited to contribute an artwork to this museum context. And that is a strange thing. If you get an invitation to do something, a very nice, prestigious commission, and you can't see why are they doing this? Why should I contribute something into this museum, right? Does not make any sense at all. But, I mean, on the other hand, you don't want to walk away. Yeah? So then it took me a time to find something, because expressing myself there as, let's say, as a creative artist didn't work at all. So I decided to do something what went more educational, and I found this very interesting problem that the most important documents in this exhibition are the handwritten musical scores of the composer, right? And then, but at the same time, 50% or more, 90% of the visitors of that place can't read music. So what are you doing with this? So I found that interesting, and so I developed something. It's a sheet of glass with metal coating, where I placed this original handwritten musical score, Opus 154 for piano, behind it, and I exhibited it exactly like all the other exhibits, with a nice piece of furniture. But now when you touch the note on the original document, you can hear it. And if you wipe along the scores with your finger, you can sequence the melody in the speed you sequence it, right? I mean, I don't know how far I should get. I mean, there was an interesting discussion coming up, of course. Is this opportune, is this okay to play with the heritage of the city of Vienna that way? Because people, when they sequence the melody, of course, they can play it backward, forward, right? So, and then you come to this point where it's very difficult to give answers, because for many questions there is no right and wrong. So it's very hard to say what is the truth. And then, so I found then a good idea, a good solution. I invited a lot of experts together for a meeting, and the most prestigious guy who came was the president of the Vienna Music Verein. That's the organization. And it was an old man, about 90 years old, super tall, skinny guy. And he then, after a long discussion, said, well, let's face that problem that way. If we assume that Mozart is looking down to us from heaven, right? And he looks into his former apartment, sees this little installation there, this little piece of music, surrounded by 5 Japanese tourists, and they are playing this backwards, forwards, but always in the wrong speed. How much would he like to see this image? And we all decided he would love this image, and took that as an excuse to continue on the project. This is the Paulskirche, again in Frankfurt, my hometown. It was the first house of parliament in Germany in 1846, where democracy has started under President Heinrich von Gagern. This period of German democracy didn't go very far. Half of them ended up in prison, and monarchy took over. But it was an important day for the nation, 150th anniversary of this start of parliamentarism. And they had a big show, but the director of the show, where they spent more than $1 million in just this one exhibition, the director was a little scared that he's going to end up only with school kids brought in buses by teachers, because, I mean, the theme is a little dry, German parliamentarism, right? And they hired me to make an installation outdoors, 24 hours accessible, almost like a little propaganda piece for the exhibition, right? And what I came up with is this forest of steel posts, how you say, engraved into the steel pole the name of German politicians, 30 from the House of Parliament from 1846. We recorded these speeches which are all documented with actors, and then another set of 30 politicians selected from the last meeting in the House of Parliament before the opening. And so by touching one of these poles, the politician, the selected one, starts immediately talking. And if you touch several of those at the same time, they talk all together. And then kids were using it, let's say, also in a funny way. They were using it like a musical instrument by making rap music. Meine Herren, guten Morgen, guten Morgen. You could play it also that way. And but the important issue with this installation was more, to me, to learn how rhetorics and language culture has changed over a period of 150 years. I mean, you might like or hate politicians, I don't know what opinion you have about these fellows. But one thing for sure, they are really, really good in convincing through language. And they were good in the past days, as good as they are today. And so it was very interesting to compare them because the format is so similar. Yeah, of course, was 98, 150 years, exactly, yeah, 98, yeah. That brought me onto the plate of these politicians, because all these contemporary politicians, they came sooner or later to see what I'm doing with them there. They heard about it. And I got a call out of the blue one morning from the director of the Museum for German History. And he asked me, Moeller, are you interested in doing an installation in the dome of the Reichstag, this dome made by the architect Norman Foster? Are you interested in doing an installation there? I said, yes, sir. And then he said, yes, and you have to do something with the third national symbol. And 8 o'clock in the morning, the third national symbol, I didn't know what that was. And now I can tell you, the first one is the colors of the country, the second one is the symbol of the country, and the third one is the national anthem of the country. So they seriously wanted me to do something with the national anthem in this beautiful dome on the roofs of Berlin, on the Reichstag, such a loaded building. And they asked me because even the most conservative backbencher in the House of Parliament knew that it's absolutely impossible to play it through loudspeaker in the space. It would be just so embarrassing. And then they knew also that Norman Foster, this famous architect, he's a good architect, no doubt. There are always people criticizing other people. But one thing for sure, he's probably the most powerful architect these days in this world. And the idea that I would come up and build a funny sculpture there in his space is not thinkable. He would just have vaporized me away. Yeah. So I had to be invisible as well. So then what I came up with as a concept was this one. I wanted to create a plate in the entrance situation of this dome, embedded flesh into the floor, a metal plate, and just, let's say, engraved into the plate Das Lied der Deutschen by Haydn and Fallersleben, the name of the anthem, right? And then I wanted to have this plate sitting on feather springs. Feather springs are these kind of industrial elements which are used to have very heavy construction machines separated from the building. That vibration is not going to be transmitted through the building. And then in the center of it, I wanted to have these actuators, which allow me to control frequencies I vibrate, computer controlled between 0 and 200 hertz. And so the plan was, here's the first prototype of that thing, and the inventor of this actuator technology, Tilman Freudenberg, where we built the first prototype, where we did pretty much everything wrong you could do wrong, but I mean, we wanted to learn here. And so the plan was to, if you have such a perforated metal surface vibrating within a heavy environment like concrete floor, the because it's perforated, it does not move any air, and so that thing stays totally 100% silent. You can't hear anything. And because it vibrates so fast, you can't even see that it vibrates. The moment you step onto that thing, it vibrates the German national anthem into your body, and if you want, you know this phenomena, you can close your ears, and then your skull becomes the resonance body, and you can hear the melody through your inner ear. And I found that a really cool idea, and I had to present it in the House of Parliament, and I was a little nervous, so I tried my best to make a good presentation, and I ended up with this, I found it quite a smart sentence, that this is a variation of the German national anthem, what moves you physically without creating any pathos. Found that a really good sentence, and they were throwing rotten tomatoes on my head. I created almost a riot in that damn place. They went ballistic. Yeah. Then a year later, I had a chance to realize it in London, and but here I'm not playing the German national anthem. I have some electronic music done by Ludger Brummer. The same composer made all sound elements for this installation I did in, in 97, 96 in Tokyo, in Spiral Art Center. And this is a 1:10 model of the sculpture, which I built it for Ludger, for the composer, that he has something, a real spatial simulation of that thing to adjust and to place all his sound elements closer to reality, because he didn't feel comfortable doing it with a keyboard. So that's the daytime situation in the gallery. There's a huge skylight on top of it, and people are wandering around in this kind of forest. And then at nighttime, I surrounded this installation with the number of profile spotlights, and they are all projecting the same square into the structure. And by touching the poles, I switched the light sources, and that creates these light and shadow textures on the floor of the installation. The thing I did with the politicians with these poles, I did that after the work I just showed you from Japan. Originally that was intended to be a musical instrument, and I designed it for a Spiral Art Center, for this beautiful open space. But that happens sometimes, that you develop or you step over something what works very well. And so then you use some of these elements again, and I did it with these politicians, and last year with this installation in Graz again. In Europe we have this beautiful tradition with this European cultural capital. So every year in Europe there's another city, European city, becomes the cultural capital of Europe for 1 year. Last year it was Graz. And they invited me to do an installation in a beautiful castle called Eggenberg. And I came up with these poles again, this time outdoor. That was actually quite difficult because it was in the late winter time, early spring. So I had to assume that there would snow would fall there into the structure, and that with capacitive systems and snow that doesn't really work so well. So we put a lot of effort in the engineering to make sure that it will work over the period of half a year, and it did finally. The context was Tower of Babel, the mythos from the Genesis 9, the confusion of tongues. I took here as a theme, and you see here these words. These are the names of country. Oh no, I have to start the sentence the other way around. I'm bringing down all languages we can receive, all different languages we can receive via satellite on the northern hemisphere. And each of these languages is represented with one of these poles. And then here engraved is the country of its origin. And this was, there was a very expensive and intense installation. I got the commission 3-4 years before this thing started, so there was a lot of preparation time. The day of the opening, they were throwing bombs on Babylon, what this whole exhibition was about. Yeah. The day after the opening, everybody, that was the attraction. Everybody was standing around this pole of Iraq listening to propaganda music. Crazy situation. The day after the opening, that thing went silent, never spoke a word again. Strange coincidence. No, satellite dish, and then you pick it up, yeah. Radio Iraq. Most recently, 2 months ago, I did another poll. Maybe I don't do any polls anymore. Maybe this is over now. So consider this is maybe the last one. An exhibition about energy in London. And I called it Do Not Touch. What describes also a little bit my position these days regarding interactive works. I get less and less interested in doing things. You know? So that's what I came up with, an art exhibition about energy. Yeah, I think you got the idea. So, first time that I ever paid more for the paperwork, liability issues and all that stuff than I paid for the actual work, for the making of the work. So just to get the safety issues on paper, yeah, it's more expensive than realizing the work. When I proposed this, the Royal Science Museum, Queen owns it. And Queen has a lot of, how we call it, equity. And when I proposed that, they thought that I'm out of my mind to electrocute the visitors in this exhibition. But it shows you also when you push hard enough, you can accomplish very, very strange things. Here a work I did in Los Angeles. It was sponsored by Jennifer Steinkamp, was also participating in this exhibition. It was sponsored by Caltech, California Institute of Technology. And they invited a few artists to do work for an exhibition for them. The constraint was that we had to use the kind of technology they are working with. Well, besides that, we could do whatever we wanted. And I fell in love with this idea of doing something on emotion recognition, because I was still relatively fresh here in Los Angeles, and somewhat, if you come from Europe, especially from countries like Northern Europe, you're a little overwhelmed with this omnipresent presence of happy people and friendliness and smiling faces and beautiful people, and that goes on your nerves to some extent. And so I thought this is a great thing to do. I do something with emotion recognition. I casted actresses who all had some relationship to news anchors, and I asked them to smile into a camera for the longest time, up to 1.5 hours, continuous smiling. And the computer system was, you say scrutinizing, is this English? Scrutinizing the expressions. And whenever the sincerity of their smiles went under threshold, the system made a little alert signal to them to tell them they should try harder to be happy. And so we concluded that with this sentence that the performance of sincerity is hard work. That's the recording studio.
Check the list. That's good, yeah. Not coming through.
Huh? This is the very beginning. Very beginning. This is the very first minute of the session. No, we did them one after the other in the studio, and then in the exhibition it came from DVD, synchronized with the sound. So first minute, right? And then this woman I show you after 1.5 hours, same session. It is for sure, 100%. I mean, this shows you also what a serious actress is able to do. I can't make that thing silent for 10 seconds, right? And they come back with the most convincing smile after being totally exhausted. I mean, look again. I mean, this is just before I shut the camera off. Look at this here, totally happy, amazing. Well, I think you got the idea. This thing is kind of successful these days. It is right now on the Peking Biennale. It is in the National Museum of Taiwan, and the Ars Electronica Center took it for permanent installation. Here, another thing I did in Japan. It was actually just a teaser to get people into my exhibition, but it worked pretty well. It is, you have to imagine that this is along a street where you have all the shopping windows. In the district where the home base of Izimiyaki Yamamoto Comme des Garçons is, and people like to look in shopping windows. And I installed that thing that way that the people from the sidewalk, they couldn't see the display, but they saw people standing in the lobby of this gallery doing, for no reason, strange things. And I found that was the way how I wanted to create the interest for people to go in. These three girls are filmed by a hidden camera. They don't know that they are on camera, and it's kind of nice how they find out how that thing works. I mean, today we are doing a lot of these sort of installations. What is interesting here is how you translate, let's say, your technical achievement into a convincing, beautiful display. And this is so damn easy, and it worked so well. But things don't need to be complicated. I did later another one I couldn't find the video so quickly. Was commissioned by the telephone company Ericsson, where we gave all these particles gravity, and we made it, and the body was kind of magnetic in this thing, and it was so technically so far more sophisticated, and also the motions looked more interesting in a way. But the overall thing was not so direct, and I couldn't really fall in love with it. Never.
So the input is based on the camera?
Yeah. This is an exhibition I had also in Tokyo, underneath of a temple. I mean, our Japanese colleagues maybe know this place. It's they call it P3. It's not existing anymore, I think. They cut it in half, or I don't know. It was a beautiful, beautiful environment, underneath of the most civilized, let's say, variation of a cemetery I have ever seen in my life. It was a water surface where, not deep, where the monks, they had cubic granite blocks. The ash of the dead bodies was filled into the granite block, and the name of the person written on the block, and then they put the 9 by 9 of these blocks into the water, and they were sticking out of the water like water lilies. A very, very civilized, beautiful place. And underneath there was this space, and I had the chance to make this installation there. What is a kind of an artificial lake created out of light, and it was an audio installation basically, where I moved a cluster of insect sounds, three-dimensional, around in this environment. Here the quality is not so fantastic. Sorry.
中央のモニターに映し出された虫の大群のように見えるものがあるでしょう。あれは仮想の生物なんです。私の後を追うようにして動き出します。この空間そのものが体験者の動きで形を変える。これがいわゆるインタラクティブアートというわけなんです。はい。雲の流れのようなこの光
It turned out to become a very poetic environment where people came in and they were sitting there for hours, performing, being in a hot spring, putting towels on their heads. Very, very, very strange. So a lot of what I'm doing is trying to create ambience. I very often don't care so much what things are doing. I care more how challenging or how interesting it is to just be there, where the event, including the people, becomes actually the thing, you know? Yeah, I have a hard time. I'm not so good in elaborating on these things. Then I did this here in Rio de Janeiro. They invited me for a show about artificial spaces, and they wanted me to do 3D computer graphics things. I didn't want to do that, so I made a lighting system. This stick here is a fluorescent light. Davey is playing with these things right now, and so I have this very strong lighting system inside these skirts, which we designed for the show. And my idea was, if I bring a light source so unnaturally close to a person's body that the person itself becomes almost like a lampshade, that should turn this whole thing into kind of alien space, into an artificial space. And that was a simple way of doing it, and it worked okay, I guess. It's not very difficult to find beautiful fashion models in Rio de Janeiro, and I found it also kind of challenging to just display their feet. That's all you could see in this shopping window. It's a huge shopping window, and you only saw these feet walking around. And these tall women have huge feet. Here you see the people outside looking into the window. It looks like a shopping window, yeah. And then they were walking a very simple choreography forever, never changed. Every day for, I don't know, 16 hours or what. It was a bunch of girls, and they changed. Sometimes the video does not really catch it to 100%. In reality, that was very pretty. And also a little boring for them, sorry. This here is a very successful ballet performance I did in '94 with the Theater am Turm, what was at that time the leading independent theater in Europe, maybe in the world. Jan Fabre, the Wooster Group, Dammtype, I mean everybody was playing in this Theater am Turm. Rainer Werner Fassbinder is coming from there, so that was the place. And I had the chance to make a piece there with a very famous dancer. His name was Stephen Galloway. He was at that time the first dancer of William Forsythe's dance company. And what I did, it's kind of strange, right? Because now we are all doing these things and we are so familiar with it, so it's kind of funny. '94 was when we heard that internet existing for the first time, right? And doing a ballet performance where all the music we are listening to is conducted by the dancer with his movements in the lights. So he's not dancing to the music, he is conducting the electronic orchestra with his movements in the lights. Was kind of a challenging thing in '94. I was lucky that I mean, this is something I've learned, and you will learn it as well. To do something really successful goes far beyond your personal creativity, your brain, your ideas. It is also defined by parameters which are out of your control. It's that you have to make the right thing at the right place at the right time. And sometimes you do. And then you can call yourself lucky, and here I did. Because of, I mean, I bet that other people did light sensors, light, and people cutting lights, making sounds, did that before me, of course. If you do things too early, nobody cares for it. Yeah, so that's not a good idea to do things too early. If you do it too late, then everybody tells you that you copied another person. So you have to find the right moment. And here I was there, and I even made it into the German school book with this thing. It was playing in MTV for the longest time. The record sold like crazy. It was fantastic. So we had these light sensors all over the stage floor. Right on the right hand, it's Pete Namlock, the composer, a very, very successful techno music composer. In the center, Stephen Galloway. And that's how that looks. yeah, and so on. To do these things is not so easy. One important thing, but if you perform, if you want to do these kind of performance things, what I believe very important, if you create an environment that you are doing it then together with somebody who knows about performance, right? I have seen so many interesting things then performed by the creators of the technology, by the engineers, and this gets so dull. So when you do such a thing, make sure that the performer you get to present your work is the best performer you can find on the planet. Very important thing. And then you need, for a lot of these things, you need plenty of time. In this, because it was such a famous theater, we had the luxury to work that out, the technical rehearsal on a rehearsal stage, on a whole theater stage, huge, big time, with lights and everything, for 3 months. Yeah? This is something what you can find in Europe. In America, probably no way. Yeah? 3 months continuous blocking of this rehearsal stage to pull that off. And that's the only way how you can, I think, how you can be sure that what you do is let's say, the best you can do at that time, right? That not, you don't have to compromise for I don't know, for other reasons. Another good lucky moment I had was in 92. 92, that's now 12 years ago. That was with this facade of a building. It was a huge project, and here I made a facade of a building what was able to change its color distribution according to the outside weather conditions. The warmer it became, the more yellowish the facade became, and with this work, because it was so huge in scale, also economical scale, it created so much income for me for so many years that I was able to finance a lot of my other work in the 92, right? That was 3 years after I started to do these things. I was able to finance all my other projects because it's easier to get an invitation for an exhibition than to get the money to develop something for the exhibition. And so I was in this very great situation that I could finance myself, and that made me accelerating better than many of my colleagues.
Microphones pick up the street sound waves and turn them into a graphic display. But that's only part of it. So with this project on the side of a building, you linked it up to...
That's my studio in Frankfurt.
As well.
Yeah, we linked it up to weather conditions. We have a little weather station on the roof of the building that measures temperature, wind speed, wind direction, the rest light.
The building reacts to people and the weather via a computer program and a rooftop meteorological station channel. The information is fed to a wall of perforated aluminium shields and the quartz halogen bulbs and coloured filters behind it. Blue illustrates cold, yellow warm, and the direction of the pattern is determined by which way the wind blows. It's one of the many sonic projects this artist...
Now I show you a bunch of works which are in progress. Let's say if the beginning was a compilation of my interest, in the first place, this is where I think my interest is now, but I'm actually not so 100% sure about that. But that's what I make my income now with. This is a commission I've got from a while ago from a city in South Germany, in Karlsruhe, where I was running into the mayor by accident in a restaurant where he was sitting together with a good friend of mine, a movie director, and my friend introduced me to the mayor, this Christian Moeller, the guy. At that time I did a lot with bitmap graphics. This is the guy who does all the things with bitmap graphics. And then the mayor said, look, we have an interesting thing for you. We have to build sound-absorbing walls along our freeways. It's all developed, engineered, all done. It's priced out. If you guarantee that you are not going to increase the existing budget for not a single dollar, and you come up with something what is more interesting than this ugly stuff these engineers were putting together, you get the commission. And so what I did then, if you want to make something interesting, and you know that you have to stay totally in budget, and you know that other people with conventional stuff already, I mean, with the conventions it already takes all the money. You have to, the only chance you can survive is you have to reinvent that thing totally from scratch. Yeah? And then hope that you are doing it in kind of a way what is maybe economically better than what the engineers did. So I came up with such a structure. It's horizontal blinds out of concrete to use them as sound absorbers, which you have to have sound absorbers on these walls in Europe. And then if I can't add anything to the wall, I thought, oh, then it's a good idea to bite something out. Must be cheaper, right? And so I'm biting out areas where I don't want to have these sound absorbers, and when they are hit then by the direct sunlight, they cast shadows, and these shadows are making bitmap graphics. This shows a length of 300 feet of this wall, so I want to have these giant portraits sitting in the landscape. We made a physical model of it, and then the museum director saw this in my studio and gave me when you are working and you do your work and you're a nice guy, and so then people start also to like you. So very important. If people don't like you, do something else. It's very important that people like you. So this museum director, he likes me a lot. He loved this thing I had there on the wall, and he said, come, I give you a commission, you make a huge thing on my museum wall, and then you can use it as a prototype for your sound absorbing thing, right? So this shows you the real scale of the sound absorbing wall with the real resolution, just not made out of concrete. But it was a great thing to get these opportunities, and you get even money for doing this. Fantastic. And so here, the first prototypes in the concrete factory, and it's all about the shadows underneath, right? Yeah. So here we made a 3D rendering of it to see how that performs over the year. You see the month and the time. So that's the first half of the day, and this shows the second half of the day. So there are slight changes. So I find them interesting. And then it's a low resolution rendering, how I want to have it sitting in a landscape later on. Then I got a commission from the city of, it was actually a beautiful thing. My friend and colleague Jennifer Steinkamp told me, Moeller, you should apply for these public art call for artists kind of things. Yeah, and I said, what is that? And then she was sending me one from Seattle, and I participated in this call for artists, and I won it right away. That was a very, very nice experience. If you do something for the first time and immediately successful, then you see that the people love you and everything is great. So this is the parking lot for the public transportation authorities in Seattle. It's basically for I think almost 1,000 buses they're going to have there. And because the buses are mainly on the street, it's always an empty, gigantic parking lot. And they wanted to have that, let's say, something around it, what gives it a little bit more of a physical presence. And that's how that looks like, right? And so that's what I came up with, because making large things with little budgets, you have to be kind of creative. So I'm using chain link fence, like a gigantic, look, the person standing there. It was quite a huge chain link fence. And then I click little plastic pixels into the chain links, right? and to display bitmap graphics with this. So this image, that was just for rehearsal. This consists out of 9,655 of these little plastic guys. Then I built a physical model of that thing. That's still a little old-fashioned. And I'm looking at it with an endoscope, what allows me to take the position of a person on the sidewalk of the other side of the street, and I see the resolution of the image in the real scale, and I see if this works out or doesn't work. For some reason there I don't trust so much the 3D technology. I love it when I see it. Okay, fine, cool, let's go ahead. So I need to have that improved. So that's how these plastic guys look like, and then they just click in the fence. And I make them out of reflective material that they pop up in the headlights of the cars at night.
How do you mark the position of the camera?
Don't know yet. That will be a nightmare. Yeah, I have to figure it out. But I will. We did, I don't have that here right now. What we do, we convert these images probably into lists. Yeah, and then it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Yeah, we give a coordinate. Well, it's a problem, but it's not a problem now. It's a problem in 3 months. Yeah. So this the images you're going to see then on that thing. It's a bunch of old men reading the papers. As George Bush doesn't read the paper, these old men, the public transportation is all about, you go in the morning there, you have the paper, read it, and you don't have to mess around with the traffic. I found that a kind of cute thing to do. Today's what? Today's Monday. Wednesday, I'm going to present this here. It's also in the state of Washington. It is a pump station for a huge water treatment operation in King County. A multi-billion-dollar thing. It's basically they bury pipes. You don't see anything of it. It's where they collect the sewage water, they pump it to a water treatment plant, and then they pump the clean water into the ocean, all underground, nothing visible. The only thing what is visible is this pump station. And they give me a commission to put an artwork there to celebrate, let's say, this water cleaning business. And I thought that this guy here wants to go away and wants to be replaced. This is the architectural model, right? And wants to be replaced by something more skinny and more significant and a little higher. And because when I think about water, I get associations of light houses, light towers. They are so beautiful, right? But then if you think water and tower, then actually you can make it straighter. You get a water tower. And there are so many different water towers, and they are so beautiful structures. And I checked, I found these images on the internet, and it's endless. It's crazy. Not that you find 50 water towers, you find 500. You can't look at them. There's too many, and they're also beautiful. Here then in the urban context, and then some of them they become famous landmarks, like in Chicago. And all these great water tower structures. So I want to make also a water tower structure, but of course I don't fill it up with water. That would not make any sense. The reason why you have a water tower is that gravity gives you the pressure to get the water out of the tub in your bathroom, right? Next to one of the biggest pump stations in the country, that does not make much sense. So I thought more about the containers of water, and let's say of the highest quality water we have, what is mineral water, and then if you think a little longer about this water issue, it's kind of a funny thing. There's the competition of all these international companies, all presenting in the most beautiful bottles with so much branding and advertising, the exact same damn product, right? Kind of strange. And this water issue becomes actually also political, I've learned, since I was thinking about what I'm going to do there. It's very interesting. The mineral oil companies, Shell, Exxon, all these people, they drill a lot of holes in the ground to find the oil, but what they find most of the time is water, and they own all these water rights. Because they're evil people, they found out that it's not such a bad idea to have all these water rights, and they now buy more water rights. Can you imagine? I mean, and at the United Nations, there was this thing coming up to what is water considered? Is water a human right? I got it, Lars Müller was pushing me with a nose into it. Or no, they said it's a product. Jesus, I can imagine that people own, let's say, the gas, what I need to put into my car, and if I can't afford it anymore, then I just walk, right? But if I depend on them because they provide me the water, then it gets kind of a little scary, right? So that's where we are, or where we go. And okay, I went too far. So it's about these water bottles, right? And bottled in France, right? And then shipped to the United States. While probably a ship from the United States is on its way to Europe, they meet in the middle of the ocean, and they just ship the water around for no reason. Then I've learned that a German company started this whole thing. It was Apollinaris. In 1860, they shipped already 2 million of these water bottles to England. Isn't it crazy? You would not expect that, right? And the same water bottle looks today like this. and this whole branding need makes them going into the, let's say, it's all a wrapping, right? Who makes the beautiful bottle? So it becomes a huge design issue. And they go berserk. Look here. What is this? Evian water bottle. So all about the bottles, right? And I'm gonna shredder them. Exactly 168,000 of them, and I found a company in Utah what melts glass to blocks, and then they break it into these rocks, and then they have a technique to tumble them, and that makes these beautiful stones, these glass gravel stones, and then I wrap it with the stainless steel mesh, put it vertical in some sort of structure like that, and then put it there at the factory, at the pump station, right? Yeah, it will have a concrete base, which we can't see right now, which is about 30 feet high. So the whole thing is 70 feet high. That's the elevation. And then we have these just ordinary fluorescent light inside, and that allows me to animate the sculpture in, let's say, some sort of a pumping algorithm, but super, super slow and super slow. I mean, not flashy at all. Well, that's it. That one. And last week I presented this guy here, what will be in San Pedro, here, the harbor of Los Angeles. And thinking about that actually, what I've shown you is actually the presentations I make there. That's why I put it together that way, that you can get an idea how I do, but this is already done here. How I do my presentations. For San Pedro, for some reason, I found this picture I found quite nice, and I mean, you can do these things. They're sitting there, and they're now really excited that you come up with your proposal, where they paid you money for, and you made it a little long for them to wait, and then you start, and everybody's so excited and curious, and then they're scared that they're going to get that kind of thing, you know. So you can play with it a little bit. But the other reason why I put that there is that it also talks a lot about sculptures in public space. And identity. This thing tells everybody that you are the United States of America because they look only here the way they look, right? So what is a beautiful thing? On the way to San Pedro, you find guys like this, beautiful machines, sitting there like animals, little animals in the mountains. Then these beautiful sculptures in the middle of the ocean. But then at the very end, I mean, if you haven't been Los Angeles Harbor, you have to go there. It's the most beautiful thing you can imagine. It's, I think, the 5th biggest harbor in the world. They move 2.5 million containers around per year. 2.5 million containers is a hell of a lot of containers. Imagine that every container needs to have a huge truck to move. A lot of containers. And then these cranes, they are all over the place to handle them. Beautiful environment. So I thought I want to do something with the machine, inspired by these cranes. Industrial machine. This is a welding robot from car factory. And I thought that it's kind of consistent to do something in public space with a robot in California, as California is so somewhat connected to this robot business. And this shows you how the robot is operating in a real factory. And it's amazing how anthropomorphic these machines are. And it's so much fun to watch them, and you don't really get tired of it. They are beautiful, strong machines. So that's the guy. And I'm going to put him on a pedestal, a very huge pedestal. Okay, this is now, wait, I have to change program. To make a artwork in public space. No, in San Pedro was given, and then there's a construction site where they built, where the money comes from, and somewhere there. There was the building, the sketch. So this is what it will be. There's this lonely guy. Can we see that? Yeah. There's this lonely guy there sitting on this pedestal with a torch in the hand. And that's what it does. Huh? I hope not. I know that they are silent, but I was not standing next to the machine yet. Or as silent as possible, yeah. Because I want to have them doing this for 24 hours, all the time. In the daytime, you switch the light off, but that's pretty much all. Maybe a little less of a motion than this.
No one can control it remotely or just program?
No, yeah. Most of it is his own thing, right? There's just this little issue when a passerby comes along. Then he gets curious and shines a light on him.
That looks very Pixar.
Yeah.
LA is doing its thing up here.
Yeah. In a way, yes, the little table lamp, right? Very cute. So, yeah. I can show you this one here. Well, okay, I think you got it. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing now, and then maybe at the end I show you. During a career, you're making okay work, successful work, then unsuccessful work. A lot of work what will never be realized. Let's say probably 20, 30, 40% of what I did was never realized for many reasons. But one thing for sure you are not going to do very often, and this is something where you're going to be proud of, where you seriously, you are so happy that you did it. And if you imagine that you would never have this profession you have, I mean, what I call myself now, I don't know, installation artist. Let's say if I would have been a dentist, yeah, I still would have loved to accomplish this one thing I'm a little proud of, right? And this is this thing here. It's a performance I organized in the early 90s, was in 93 or something like that, with Oskar Zalla, who is the inventor of the first synthesizer in the world, called Trautonium, that thing. And he is the pioneer of electronic music. There's no misunderstanding possible. And I invited him. It was very difficult to convince this old man to come to give a performance. He made all the soundtracks for Hitchcock, The Birds. If you see this movie again, just close your eyes and listen to the sound for a moment. All electronic music done with this analog synthesizer together with Hitchcock in his little studio in Berlin. And he made a lot of soundtracks. He opened the Olympic Games in 1936, these Nazi propaganda games in Berlin with synthesizer music, 1936. That's him with his instrument when he was 85 years old. I rented a small studio. We had a small audience where he was playing, but everybody came. Tangerine Dream, Kraftwerk, everybody came. And I projected this concert live on this facade, which I showed you before, the color-changing facade. At that time, with the biggest video projection ever done. I had to fly the video projectors in, one from Los Angeles, the other one from London. And we had in the facade the greatest outdoor sound system ever installed. It was not rock and roll. It turned the street into a chamber music environment. And then he was playing. That's the only instrument of this kind in the world, and he was the only person who could play it. What I wanted to improve with this as well was it's a public space, it's a shopping street, a very busy shopping street. I wanted also to show that you can attract normal people outside in the street. You can attract crowds by not showing Mickey Mouse. People are far more curious, and the attention span of normal people in the street is so much higher than what marketing people think it is, that it sometimes annoys me. And we were super successful with this thing. One reason why Zalla is not playing live, never was playing live, is that it takes him up to 20 minutes to go from one composition to the next one because he has no digital presets. He has to turn buttons forever. And I told him, no problem, we're going to show sequences out of your most famous movies, which I like the best. And this is a sequence out of a movie called A Voyage to the Moon. He had, because of his history, really great contacts to the NASA people, and they gave him footage of what all went wrong on the moon, what was not allowed to be shown in the United States because they found it embarrassing. And he compiled this most beautiful movie together. Here you see a sequence where these astronauts are trying to stick something in the ground, and because of the lack of gravity, becomes a major thing. Beautiful film. I don't know what's embarrassing about that. Fantastic. No. Last year, or beginning of this year. In an appropriate way, I would say. It was Florian Schneider from Kraftwerk who told me this. We became friends over this performance. And Oscar Sala spent his last year in a retirement home. Don't ask me how old he was, can't calculate that. He was there was 92. He was 85 and 92. Who can calculate that out? I don't know, who cares? Yeah. No, he was 85. Who cares? He was over 90, right? And so he had this armchair in the lobby of this retirement home next to the open fireplace where he was always sitting in the evening. And then one day he came down the steps, and an old lady was sitting in this armchair, and he made this old lady such a hard time. Finally, she gave up and she walked away, and he made himself comfortable in his armchair, and then he never woke up again. So I find that a kind of a cool way to pass away. Okay, that was it. Thank you very much.
Sure, there's questions from the audience. Anyone? Hold on.
Yeah.
Oh, he heard.
The question was if you taught in Germany.
Yes, I did. I mean, in Germany 3 years, and in Austria, I think 2 years. Same kind of school. I mean, that's why I wasn't particularly different.
Anyone else?
Do you think the media arts will ever get accepted here, like the way it's accepted?
Say again?
Do you think the media arts will ever get accepted, like the way it was accepted in Europe? Do you think the media arts will ever get accepted the same as Europe, as the way, in the U.S. right?
Yeah, acceptance is one thing. I would think it is as accepted in Europe as it is accepted here, but it's much easier to do things in Europe or in Japan because there you find public fundings for the arts and in the culture, and whenever you want to do something, let's say what is outside the commercial gallery fields, you depend on either you are rich, right? Then you do it yourself, or you depend on public funding. And in Europe, there's plenty. Here is not very much. And here you have to always to pretend. I mean, there are grants around, but they want you to do things which they find important. So if you do a work on minorities, you'll probably find a grant. Or on like a work on, let's say, a health problem like AIDS, you'll probably find a grant. If you want to make a project, let's say, like, what's his name again, like Nick Habermas on happiness by just crashing 2 million Chinaware plates, you don't find the funding, you see? And there are some some restrictions. So what works fine is this public art opportunity here in the United States. Hi.
So you said in the beginning how you were getting a bit tired of the whole media art thing.
Say again?
You said in the beginning how you were getting a bit tired of the whole media art, well, a certain type of media arts, and based on your current proposals, it seems it's more towards architecture again in the public space. Would you change your profession, job title from installation artist to something else?
Then, I'm not getting tired seeing media artworks. I'm getting a little bit tired of making them myself because a lot of the things I know now very well to do them, or I don't find them so challenging anymore, right? And the fascination about the technology itself is totally gone for me, totally. There was a little in the beginning, now it's completely gone. And then one thing I'm totally tired of is to have these computers with me in the final result, in the final exhibition context. That is something I try now as hard as I can to. I've used computers for the making. For example, the Smiling Women is something what works on DVD players, yeah. And I had this opening in Taiwan, and I came there, and I walked into the thing, and it was all there. It was all there. I just said, "Oh, great, fine." I go back to my hotel. I like that a lot. And I'm tired of these things which don't work then in the right moment, and then also that the people who, let's say, you find in the environments like museums and galleries, that they don't know how to handle these technologies. Yeah, so you always a DVD player, it breaks, they buy a new one, they don't even call you, they just fix it by themselves. I like that a lot. And if it would not have even this, like this fence with the reading man, right, where when it's one day installed, then nobody can take it down anymore. Let's say a truck what is running into the fence maybe destroys it, but it will be always there. And I like that more. Yeah.
Your graffiti, the project, have you thought about the possible graffiti on your buttons?
A graffiti on the fence?
Yeah.
You mean as a picture or what?
No, people making graffiti.
But that they spray paint my little picture.
Because it'll change.
Yeah, maybe they do. I can't help that. Yeah. Yeah.
The robot is a super sophisticated computer.
Yeah, but I go there, buy it look in the shelf. Oh, I love this one. Tell them that I want to have it, right? Then I write a check, and then they ship the thing with the truck to the fabricator. He puts it on the pole, and they plug it in, and I have no problem with this machine. And if it breaks, there's a warranty, and they all fix it. You are not involved in this.
So you have become a veritable conceptual artist, architect then, right?
Oh, no, I never did the things myself.
Yeah, but now it's very clear that you approach the concept, make sure that it works, and that it's not
really. I have a show coming up in New York in February, where I do a lot of light installations, which I maybe make all by myself.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then I have now every Sunday I have meetings with the improv acting group, and we are writing a non-existing diary for, I don't know where that goes, but no, I try to do different things.
Do you have any tips on finding staff and having them do good work for you?
If I have any?
How you find staff?
How I find them? I don't find them mostly. It's more that this developed. When I started in the very early 90s, that was before internet. And before internet, you have to imagine that the computer scientists and programmers, they were not so requested. Yeah, they were very happy when they could do something what, let's say, was I don't know, a little more on the visual side than the pure computer science. And at that time, I contacted a couple of universities that I would like to have young people working with me, and then they came, and then I ended up with, at the very end, with one of them, but he financed his whole 10 years. He quit computer science, he started to study medicine, became a surgeon, and he financed his whole way by working with me on these things. Sven Thön is his name. And he's still my technical director for all issues. Yeah? And other people, I was working with different musicians. Then finally you run into one guy who really is the perfect person for you. And you keep working with these people. So I have a bunch of maybe 15, 20 people, lighting designer, the same. I work almost always with the same lighting guy. He lives in Australia. And I have these people around me, and whenever I need them, they are there. They help me. And they are all successful, independent people by themselves. So they don't have to rely on me, let's say, to give them regularly commissions. And then sometimes on very limited projects, well, just give it a try and ask somebody where I think it could work. And I always put the chemistry, let's say the social skills of somebody, as the number one criteria for collaboration.
Thanks.
Well, thank you very much for your good chemistry.